Welcome back to the Pro Sports Podcasters on YouTube. My name's Colbert Ron. Most of you know me as Kobe. And because of some conversations I had with a previous video, it came to me that maybe I should put together a video of some of the best budget stacks that you can get on NFL all day. And I've selected 8 different players, 8 different moments that range on the platform anywhere from $4 to $6, depending on when you go on and if you get it at the low point or $6 being the high point, who are definitely going to factor into performance-based challenges. And I've got a nice nugget about that as well, is that today we got the notification from Own the Moment that they are going to be having their own NFL all-day fantasy football platform. It's going to go into effect. It's going to begin shortly before the season starts. They're going to be releasing more additional information as we get on through the off season, through the summer. And then by week 1, we should have a NFL all-day fantasy football, weekly fantasy football system put together, which is just absolutely fantastic. It's one of the things I've been looking forward to the most. It's what I hope to get from this platform right off the beginning when it was announced, because NFL football and fantasy sports are synonymous. They are one and the same. They go together like ham and cheese. Pretty much, if you are a dedicated NFL fan, there's a very good chance that you either play fantasy football, you pay attention to fantasy football, or you definitely know what it's all about. So having fantasy football involved in the NFL all-day platform, fantastic. I almost swore there, but it's absolutely fantastic. Right now, I'm going to get into my top 8 budget stacks, and these are going to cover both defensive and offensive players, and I'll go into why I've collected these specific 8 players. And I'm going to begin with a player on a struggling team that you haven't seen much of in the last few years due to injury and a COVID opt-out, and that's CJ Mosley. CJ Mosley is 100% one of the best linebackers in the league, but people have forgotten. They've absolutely forgotten because he hasn't played much. He suffered through some injuries. He had the COVID opt-out. He's on a terrible team, so they don't get that much publicity when it comes right down to it. But CJ Mosley is in an excellent position to succeed this season. I believe he's coming into the season 100% healthy. He's going to be amped up because they've done a lot in the last 2 years to kind of increase the potential of that specific team. The New York Jets are still going to suck, let's be honest, but they're not going to suck so bad, right? They'll be worth watching in this case, in which case he gets a chance to showcase his skills, showcase why they gave him like the $85 million contract. So CJ Mosley, 100%. Last I checked, he was at $4. I mean, he's going to get so many opportunities on that particular defense because offenses are going to be on the field a lot. And if they get leads against them, they're going to run a lot. And the best thing to stop a run is a middle linebacker, and that's his position. So you got to like CJ Mosley. 100%. He's stackable. Next on my list is J.C. Jackson. And J.C. Jackson went from being the number 2 cornerback on the New England Patriots to the number 1 cornerback on the New England Patriots to one of the top interception leaders in the league to then being released and signed by the Los Angeles Chargers. And a lot of people are looking at like, the Chargers did the right thing. They picked up a stud defensive back. They've got someone that can lock down opposing top wide receivers. And that's the reason for doing this in a very competitive AFC West. But no, the reason for doing this is because the AFC West is going to be a shootout. It's going to be a shootout. You're going to need as many top-tier defensive backs as you can. This isn't a situation where he goes from the New England Patriots where, let's say, he was targeted a lot to the Los Angeles Chargers where he won't be targeted. That's not true. He may even be targeted more because against the Patriots, you had very defensively minded, low-scoring, almost slow-paced games, whereas in the AFC West, he's going to have all kinds of opportunities to pick off deep passes, aggressive shots across the middle. I really like J.C. Jackson, the move to Los Angeles Chargers. It actually kind of bothers me a bit because I'm a Denver Broncos fan, and I have a feeling he's going to pick off Russell Wilson at least once or twice this season. But I like J.C. Jackson. He's going to factor into performance-based challenges for sure, especially when it comes to interceptions. Then I've got Trey Hendrickson. And this is actually the name that came up when I was talking with one of my followers, because he's stacked himself like 25 Trey Hendricksons at this point. And I don't blame him. Trey Hendrickson, since his move to Cincinnati, has been a sack stud, because that's all he has to do, right? That's the beauty of being in Cincinnati for him, is that they've got such a high-powered offense. They're usually going to be in the lead and force opposing teams to pass against them, which gives him opportunities to get to the quarterback because he's got to hold the ball that little bit longer. And he doesn't have to really worry about him handing it off and being out of the play. So Trey Hendrickson had literally his statistically best season last season. I expect him to build on that as he gets even more familiar with the defense, and that team gains confidence after going to the Super Bowl. I really like Trey Hendrickson. He's dirt cheap. He's like $4 or $5 or whatever. Go out and get yourself a few, because he's going to factor into sack challenges for sure. Next on my list, I've got Von Miller. And come on, it's obvious, right? The Von Miller common's like $5. He just got signed by the Buffalo Bills, right? Statistically, most people are picking them as the number one team in the AFC. He's going to get ample opportunity to destroy quarterbacks. Plus, he's a phenomenal player overall. So Von Miller for $5, like, it's a no-brainer. I've got multiple Von Millers. I'm not even really stacking moments, but how can you not in this situation? So Von Miller, get him on your roster, get multiples on your roster. Then I got my first offensive player, and this is going to sound like a bit of a homer pick for me because it's Cortland Sutton, right? A Denver Bronco. But if you followed the Denver Broncos over the last few seasons, you will realize that Cortland Sutton is one of the best wide receivers in the league, and that's with shitty quarterback play, right? That's with quarterbacks that don't really get him the ball. He literally has to go up and fight for the ball. Him and Tim Patrick have been two of the best, like 50-50 ball receivers in the league for the last couple of years. But Cortland Sutton is your prototypical wide receiver. He's a true number one, absolute stud. And with Russell Wilson throwing him the ball, it's going to be ridiculous. Now, I did go ahead and say that you never know who Russell Wilson is going to pick as his favorite target, but that doesn't even matter, right? It doesn't matter, because let's say he decides that Jerry Jeudy's his guy. Jerry Jeudy may get the lion's share of targets, but Cortland Sutton is still going to get those big bombs, those red zone targets, because of how big and powerful and how just unstoppable he is when it comes to those like short yardage, tight defense or red zone situations. Cortland Sutton, 100%. He's going to factor in to at least a few of these like reception or touchdown challenges over the course of the season. Then I've got Jacobi Meyers. And Jacobi Meyers is one of these like overlooked wide receivers, right? If you're a casual fan, you're like, who the hell is Jacobi Meyers? Now, there are casual fans that are New England Patriot fans, and they've remained that way even since Brady's left. They're like, well, I was dedicated to the Patriots all those years. I'm going to stick with them for a while. They may know Jacobi Meyers because come right down to it, he's the number one receiver on the New England Patriots. He's the only receiver that Mac Jones can trust, and that's why he's here for me. He may not get a lot of touchdowns, although there will be games that I expect New England Patriots to, get a sizable lead and have him involved, and that could factor in here and there, but he will get the majority of the targets from Mac Jones because flat out, it is the only receiver he can trust, right? It's the only one. So in receptions challenges, in receiving yards challenges, he's definitely going to be a factor, and he might pop on the occasional touchdown challenge. But Jacobi Meyers, being totally overlooked, he is by far a number one. There are a lot of teams that have sort of a 1A, 1B. He is a number one, and he's their number two. That's how important he is to the New England offense. Then I've got T. Higgins, and this is kind of like the opposite, right? T. Higgins is definitely the 1B to Jamar Chase's 1A. Jamar Chase comes into the league, rookie season, lights it up, becomes the automatic number one target for Joe Burrow, and T. Higgins gets kind of overlooked, but what people forget is that T. Higgins had a 1,000-yard season last season. He actually had pretty much just as many targets as Jamar Chase. It's just that in the beginning of the season, Jamar Chase blew up relatively early because he was seen as a rookie and maybe not as prepared as T. Higgins was. Then the focus started to switch to him, but there was no video there, right? They had no game tape on what he was going to do in the NFL. They could look at what he did in college, but it was a completely different system. So he took advantage of that situation and a hot quarterback to give him that kind of season, and T. Higgins got kind of overlooked. The big difference between them really is the number of touchdowns. Jamar Chase became the primary red zone target. But I don't see that happening this season. I really don't. You've got a full season of tape, right? Of video on Jamar Chase. Teams are going to start to game for him. They're going to start to double team him more. It's actually going to open up T. Higgins a little bit more in the offense. And I expect their season end totals to be much closer in comparison when when it's all said and done. I still think Jamar Chase may edge him out, but the difference here is that T. Higgins is like a $6 moment, right? $6 debut moment. Whereas Jamar Chase is going to cost you a fair amount. And people, because they're chasing the Jamar Chase, no pun intended, T. Higgins is being forgotten about. But you shouldn't, because he's going to have some massive games. There are going to be games that Jamar Chase is just effectively eliminated from the offense. Defenses are going to take him out of the equation and force Joe Burrow to use T. Higgins or Joe Mixon to beat them and see if they can do it that way. And in those cases, T. Higgins is going to have pretty good games. He's going to be the one that you want on your own the moment roster for those fantasy weeks, because he's going to end up having a bigger week than Jamar Chase is. Realistically, if you look at last season's totals, you're going to notice that Jamar Chase had 5 games over 100 yards in receiving. And T. Higgins had 4. It was only 1 game's difference, right? They both have the capability to go big at any given moment, and that's what you require in fantasy football. It's also what you require in performance-based challenges, so T. Higgins is a no-brainer to me. And then the last one on my list is Elijah Mitchell. And Elijah Mitchell would easily be one of the top running backs in the NFL if it wasn't for injuries, right? He's been injury prone. He's been plagued by injuries. So when he's healthy, he's phenomenal. And we got to see that last season. There's like a 6-game stretch where he just lit it up. And the other negative here is that he's on the San Francisco 49ers, a Shanahan-based system, who generally likes to spread the ball around when it comes to their running backs. But Shanahan's will give it to the hot hand if there is one, and he proved that he is one. He is definitely a top-tier, number 1 bell cow back. That's what he is. He may not get used that way, though. He should begin this season 100% healthy. He had missed some time at the end of last season due to, the knee injury, shoulder injury. But he's had the entire offseason to get healthy, get prepared, get ready. They're predicting he'll be back in time for the preseason or minicamp or whatever. But to me, as long as he's 100% by week 1, this is a moment and a player worth gambling on. Because if he establishes himself right away the way he did last season, Shanahan's going to abuse him between their own 20-yard line and the opponent's 20-yard line. That's why I like him for rush yards here. I like him for rush yards. I like him for carries. I don't necessarily like him for touchdowns. I really don't, because on that particular offense, if you've got a healthy George Kittle, he becomes your number 1 red zone target. And then your number 2 red zone target, if they start Trey Lance, is probably Trey Lance, right? Trey Lance is going to vulture a lot of red zone carries from Elijah Mitchell or any of the other running backs on that roster because he's so good with his feet. And it makes it a much more difficult offense to defend if he's mobile. So I don't like him for touchdowns. I really don't. But I expect him to get the lion's share of the carries moving the ball down the field on a run-first offense, of which there isn't that many left in the NFL right now. It's all throw-first offenses. So Elijah Mitchell could be a real score here. It comes with that risk. But I mean, at like $5, it's not a risk, right? It's worthwhile taking the gamble and stacking a few Elijah Mitchells if that's your thing. And those are the guys I selected.